Hello and welcome to Around the Clock. I'm your host, Yolanda Greaves. We have a great show lined up for our first show in January. We're going to be having two guests visit us. We're going to have Michael Herbert, our newly appointed town manager, come on and talk about the transition. And we're also going to have Carl Hakansson, one of the other members of the Board of Selectmen. We're going to get to do an interview with Carl, and then he'll be also joining me for our Selectmen update. So stay with us. I'll be right back with Carl and our Selectmen's update. Selectmen's update. Selectmen's update. Welcome to Around the Clock, our Selectmen's update. I have Carl Hakansson with me today, another member of the Board of Selectmen, to help me do the update from our January 6th meeting. It was a somewhat light meeting. We started with a license hearing extending the entertainment license for Han2. Han2 is a restaurant over on 135. We gave them a acoustic music entertainment license back in 2014. They would like to expand that to more live music and more bands. But it was a good discussion.
It was a good discussion, and both sides, the neighbors, the whole idea of having electric music and a band and a place to go in town, I think, is a positive one. But I certainly understand the concerns of the of people in the neighborhood that are trying to sleep or trying to just have some privacy. And so I think it was a constructive conversation, and I think that we're going to be able to work something out, hopefully, that allows for both to be satisfied. And
we've extended their hearing to February 2nd to follow up with some of the recommendations that we've given them before we make our final decision. We then talked about the expansion of the Warren Woods Ad Hoc Committee. It is currently a 5-member committee, and they've done some preliminary work looking at just Warren Woods. We've decided to expand it to include sustainability, conservation, historical, and open space, so that they can look at more of the area, because we're going to be including the 22 Elliott Street when that becomes part of the, when it comes to the town. And then the purchase of the barn and silo at the Warren Conference Center.
Right.
That's a nice tie in all those areas together.
And it's good to get a diversity of input as to how those areas will be used.
Yep. Then we went into our old and new business. We talked about the volunteer breakfast date, which will be on Saturday, February 27th. That is when volunteer committees that are appointed by the Board of Selectmen get to come together, and we get to say thank you to all the other volunteers who help do the great work that's happening here in Ashland. We then talked about a road traffic safety committee. It was first presented back in the second meeting in December by Ed Berman to look at all the traffic issues, and they seem to be coming more and more. Traffic and parking and things like that. So we talked about that. We opened the annual town meeting warrant. Town meeting will be on May 4th. And we looked through all the dates of when things needed to be done. We started the discussion for the override study committee update. And thoughts on the override process, Carl?
Well, interesting and thorough, I think, and diverse, and complicated as well, to try to find a balance, the right balance that's representative of the entire town.
Okay. Then we talked about some downtown parking facilities and issues and how can we expand and change some of the parking. We presented and talked about the town manager public forum, where we were going to be doing a public interview with Michael Herbert, and that happened on January 12th. And then we talked about some vacancies that had to happen. Our Board of Assessors and our Water Policy Committee. Bill Brown, who's been a very strong volunteer doing a lot of different things, was on the Board of Assessors, and the Water Policy Committee has had to step down. That's a real loss to the community that he's not available.
Absolutely. Bill's a great guy, and everyone I know just has good things to say about him, so he will be missed, and we wish him well.
So that was it for the January 6th meeting. Hope you've enjoyed this Selectmen's update. Stay with us for more Around the Clock. More Around the Clock. More Around the Clock. Welcome back to Around the Clock. This is our January 20th Board of Selectmen update. We had a rather full meeting. It started with regular citizens' participation, but our first thing that we did, which was a very positive thing, was we were able to appoint Michael Herbert as our town manager, full-time town manager, and we'll get to speak with him later in the show. Carl, thoughts on that appointment?
I think it's a great appointment. I totally supported it. We had our meet and greet last week over at the community center, which I thought went very well. I thought the citizens asked a lot of great questions. I thought Michael answered them very well. And he knows the issues, and so there won't be any learning curve there. I think that we'll be able to just pick it up in stride. So I'm looking forward to it.
Right, he was able to jump right in. We also had some appointments. We appointed members to the Warren Woods Ad Hoc Committee. We expanded it in our January 6th meeting, and we had Carl get appointed, as well as Tricia Kendall from the Sustainability Committee, and then Greg Wands from the Open Space Committee.
Right.
And we have one more.
And we have a member that we have to have appointed from the Historical Commission, which will fill out the expanded Warren Woods Ad Hoc Committee. And hopefully we can start meeting in February and planning what activities are going to be at the new properties in spring and summer.
Right. We still have to get the 22 Elliott Street. That hasn't happened yet, but
that will in the spring.
Yeah, once that project moves forward. We then also had a town manager appointment where Nat Strasburger, who is our town planner, has now also been appointed the Director of Community Development and Health. That comes with the resignation of Matthew Selby, or Selby as everyone called him, who had that role, as well as our conservation officer. So any news on when we'll be replacing the conservation agent?
Well, there has been an interview process with Michael, and they whittled it down to 2 candidates, and I know that we're going to interview at least one of them on Monday night.
Okay, good. Then we went into old and new business. We had to approve the sale of a note, just one of those housekeeping things for some of the debt that we have. We also then made the formal notice of the vacancy for our Board of Assessors because of Bill Brown, and we talked about how we're going to try and fill that vacancy up until the May election. So we have trying to get a meeting planned. It was interesting to find out with one of the Board of Assessors away how we have to do it. So then,
but we did find a way.
But we did find a way, so that'll be happening. We had to accept a gift. It's always interesting that even those smaller things, we have to accept them, but that was good. We updated or went further into our charity bin regulations that Steve Mitchell brought forward. A couple of other smaller things, designer selection criteria that we need to do because of some state laws. We talked about the ratification of the collective bargaining agreements between our with our police department and our public works. And then, of course, we went into another discussion of the override. The override has been taking a lot of time lately.
It has been, and it did last night as well. And a lot of good discussion, I think. You know, there's a lot of fleshing out that's been done and that still needs to be done. But I think it's been a healthy discussion so far.
Well, and as members of the board, we've all said yes, we're going to put an override on the ballot because the citizens need to make that decision. It's just making sure that what gets put on is the best. And I don't even really know if you can say it's the best option, but
well, it would be an option that would benefit
everybody.
The most people.
Right. Yeah. So continue for that, but we have made a commitment to at least make a decision by our first meeting in February. So there'll be other discussions happening. And then we talked about doing a community survey that was presented by Michael Herbert. And then we wrapped up the night. It wasn't too late. Fortunately, we were done at about 9:30. We've been taking bets lately as to how late we're going to be there because we've had some late ones.
Well, we've also had executive session before these meetings, so it's been an added hour to the meeting. So
good. Well, and that was our meeting on January 20th. Thanks for watching this Selectman's Update, and we'll be back with more Around the Clock. Welcome back to Around the Clock. We have our first guest of the new year. Welcome to Michael Herbert. Michael, you have known as our Assistant Town Manager, and just last night you were officially appointed our full-time Town Manager. So. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Yolanda, for expressing the confidence in me to be able to do the job. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, the process has been really good in regards to how we moved you into the full-time town manager position. We did, all the Board of Selectmen members got to speak to you individually, making sure you wanted it. That was the first step. And then we had the interview process for the public last week. And again, a lot of good positive feedback and a lot of good
Absolutely.
questions. Okay, so it's now January 2016. You're the full-time town manager. What have you been spending your first 2 weeks on?
Oh my goodness. Well, that's a good question. It's what haven't I been spending my time on? Really just kind of getting up to speed on some of the projects that Tony was really handling. And that includes a lot of the development projects, a lot of like the Robert Hill Way, also the Rail Transit District, things of some of these larger development projects that are really important, some of the infrastructure things. That was really Tony's wheelhouse. But we're also fully into the budget season, of course. So doing that, which is, that's what I'm usually doing at this time in the year. But we also have this override discussion happening, so
Right.
spending some time with that. So it's really just getting caught up. But really the main priority right now is getting staffed up and filling some open positions. And like I might have said before, we're going to see a lot of new faces in Town Hall, but then we're also going to see some familiar faces in new roles. And so that's going to be a real critical thing, task to get done in the next month.
So let's start with positions at Town Hall, changing ones, new ones, and where you're at with them. So first, people have heard about the HR position.
Correct.
There'll now be a posting for an assistant town manager.
Correct.
We also had some other changes. Take us through some of the changes that have happened, new people that have come on board, and what you're looking for those positions moving forward.
Sure. So as you mentioned, we were in the process of interviewing for an HR director, and we had a very strong pool of candidates for that. We've hired an economic development director recently. She started at the beginning of the calendar year. What I've decided to do is decouple the assistant town manager finance director role and just having it an assistant town manager role, and then placing the finance director responsibilities probably on our town accountant, Brittany Iacoponi. She's more than capable of doing that. And then that would allow me to find an assistant town manager that could really complement my skill set. I think one of the great things for Tony and I as a team is we had very, very different skill sets, but they were
Yes.
very, very complementary, and we really worked well together. So it's going to be kind of filling somebody who can handle those details, those logistics, things of that nature. But and then we also have a familiar face, Nat Strasberg, as our town planner. He's going to go into the role of Director of Community Development and Health, a very critical role at any time, but certainly at this point in time in Ashland's history. Then we'll be bringing on a new conservation agent soon. All of these positions are critical on a number of levels, just from a process standpoint, but we're a small staff, so it's very critical for us as an organization, and not to be trite, but almost like as a family, if you will.
But also I see, because a person may have a specific role, like finance director, but they're doing a broad range of things.
Right.
And someone like Nat, who's moved into this new position, but will still be our town planner.
Correct.
So you need people who can do a lot of different things, even though their title might be one thing.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's just the nature of working in a smaller town, is that in lean budget times, and budgets have certainly become leaner as the years have gone forward, we've all had to handle different responsibilities and take on different responsibilities, and that could be, no job is beneath us, if you will. I mean, I would even take receipts and tax collections from people if I need to do that, or if people need help. So it really is, again, a family atmosphere, but everybody's got to be willing to pitch in.
Right. And certainly having you in place already, the transition, the uncertainty of who's going to be at the helm is now taken care of.
Right.
So that we can move on to our next piece of discussion, is the override discussions that are happening. Take us through, you've been part of the override study committee, take us through where things are at and what we need to do moving forward with the override discussion.
Sure. So the override study committee spent several months and many meetings going over different override options, different proposals, what would be included in an override. Their report was released early in the calendar year, and that report recommended a two-tiered override structure, being the first question would be 1.5 million, and it included a number of items. And then the second question would be for an override of 2.4 million, which would include all the items that were in the 1.5 million piece, plus $900,000 in additional critical items. So right now, that process is right at the Board of Selectmen's hands. And so the board is responsible for putting the actual ballot question on the ballot and setting the election date. And so now the board is, deliberating and, basically evaluating and analyzing different options. So there's a couple of different...
Our goal as the board is to get a decision and vote taken by our board by our first meeting in February so that the full education to the community can move forward.
Exactly, because that's critical. I think, people need to have the opportunity to talk about it and learn about it and learn about what the pros and cons are to the override and the consequences of it passing and failing, because ultimately it's a value decision for the community. We've done everything we could, I think, from an efficiency standpoint. There's always things that we can improve upon, but they're going to be little things, and we're going to be able to make some incremental approaches. But if we really want to go further as a community and in a more positive direction, we really need to have these items that are on the override. But it's going to be a community decision. Right,
because as you and Tony have worked over the last 2.5 years, you've taken some big changes and you've created some big efficiencies, the healthcare that you've done by updating and improving some of our finance policies. You've improved our bond rating, which has helped in regards to some of our debt and the interest and things we pay there.
Absolutely.
So we've done some of the things to save money. Now we need to look at, as you said, as a community, do we want to have more revenue available to do the things that we think is important?
Absolutely. A lot of work in the last 2 years on creating those efficiencies. And I said this at the interview process. One of the things I'm most proud of is the fact that we've been able to address some of our long-term liabilities, if you will, while at the same time, investing in our current operations as well. So you always want to find a balance, and I think we've certainly achieved that. But if we want to go further, we need to do more.
Okay. Moving forward, what does your next month look like in regards to your new position?
So in the next month, I'm going to be doing a lot of interviews.
Okay.
So again, just staffing up, and really, I just without an assistant, it's kind of double the workload, of course. But that's really, the main thing. And again, it's going to be focusing on having conversations regarding the override, answering questions related to that. Moving forward on the House Street Solar Project, that's before the Planning Board now. And some of the other projects like the Rail Transit District, that will be before the Planning Board as well. So doing that, and I want to do a couple of things that we haven't really talked about. And we really want to strengthen our relationships with some of our local colleges and universities. So having conversations with Framingham State, Mass Bay Community College, those I want to start having those conversations as well.
How are you going to, if you feel you need to, sort of make yourself different from Tony? How are you approaching your position as town manager? Or are you going to stay with similar things that he's done?
I think very similar things. I think, I think I've had a lot of influence, I think, on the direction of the town in the last 2.5 years. Tony gave me a lot of responsibility. Tony gave me a lot of room to develop proposals and develop ideas and run with them. Tony was certainly more of an operations type of guy, and I certainly, that's a skill set I'm really looking for in an assistant. I'm really kind of more that big picture fellow, the one who can really kind of clarify and establish, I think, a vision and really kind of hopefully communicate that to the community.
One last specific question as we lead into town meeting. You and Tony had initiated the town managers forums leading up to town meeting. Is that something you'll continue, improve upon, or what do you think?
Absolutely. We'll always look to improve upon it. And for all the differences that Tony and I had, I think one of the things that, again, helped us work together so well was the fact that we had very similar values in terms of transparency, citizen engagement, and furthering good government principles, if you will. So that's certainly something that will be continued. I want that to be ingrained in the community. I want that to just be expected and not necessarily a new thing.
Okay. Before we finish, is there one last thing you'd like to say to the viewers as the new town manager?
Sure. Just be ready to hear me talk a lot about a community vision and a community strategic plan. I think we really need, as a community, to decide where we want to be in 20 years and start working back from there and seeing the action steps that we need to take to get there. And my hope is that I'm here for that whole 20-year period. So.
Well, Mike, thank you for coming on Around the Clock. Congratulations again on the appointment as our full-time town manager, and I look forward to working with you, hopefully for a long time.
Same here. Thanks,
Okay.
Yolanda.
Stay with us. We'll be back with more Around the Clock. Welcome back to Around the Clock. My next guest today is Carl Hakansson. Carl, welcome to Around the Clock.
Thank you, Yolanda. Nice to be here.
This is Carl's first time on the show, but I'm sure for many of our viewers, you are not unknown to them. I'm sure many people know who you are. Carl is currently a member of the Board of Selectmen, on the Conservation Committee, on the Land Stewardship Committee, and as of last night at our last meeting, you've now been appointed to the Warren Woods Ad Hoc Committee.
That's correct.
And Land Stewardship and Warren Woods Ad Hoc probably tie in together.
They do, and Land Stewardship is also a subcommittee of the Conservation Commission, so those three are really kind of interrelated.
Well, let's start at the beginning. How long have you been a resident of Ashland?
Well, I was born and raised in Ashland,
Okay.
So it's been some time. I haven't lived in Ashland my entire life, but about 10 years ago, when my dad passed away, my parents had always lived in Ashland, and I moved back to allow my mom to stay in their house. And during that time, I built my own house. And so I've been back in town for the last 10 years or so.
Okay, and besides all these volunteer committees, what do you do?
Well, for work or for play? And there's
little
not
bit
too
of
much
each, I
play
guess.
these days.
Yeah, you're keeping pretty busy. What do you
yeah.
do for work? What's your
Well,
job?
I have two jobs. I'm an
Okay.
attorney, and I work in environmental law and land use law. And I work with Native American Indian tribes with regard to environmental and land use issues as well. And I've done that for 22 years or so.
Okay.
Before that, I was an animal behavioralist, and
wow.
but went back to law school. And I also teach at Framingham State University.
Okay,
and
but you're also a musician.
Musician as well, yeah.
So how did that all come about? Being a musician and the animal behavioralist, and then going back to law school, and
Well, gee, it's a long story.
let's condense it.
Well, I've been interested in music for most of my life. And when I was young, I was somewhat of an athlete as well. And in those days, it seemed like you were either an athlete or a musician. So it sometimes caused some issues if you were both. And so I stopped playing music to concentrate on being an athlete, but I was also kind of small, so I got beat up a lot. And so after high school, I had been a musician ever since I could remember, but then really delved deeply into playing music when I started into college.
And where did you go to college?
I went to undergraduate at Framingham State.
Okay.
And at that time, I was an environmental biology major.
Okay.
And so from there was the natural transition to animal behavior. And while I was working animal behavior, I started into graduate school at Northeastern. And during that time, I took a couple of environmental law classes and really kind of had this epiphany that that's what I wanted to do. So I left graduate school and applied to law school.
Wow.
And went back to law school.
And then how did it transition into your work with Native Americans and land use for them?
Well, I would like to say that had some kind of a noble connection, but one of my other hobbies is horseback riding.
Okay.
And so in the early 90s, I saw the movie Dances with Wolves. And I said, that's how to ride horses, and that's where to ride horses. And it was filmed in South Dakota, so my friend and I went out to South Dakota to spend some time trying to find a place to ride a horse on the plains.
Wow.
And I'd always been interested in the horse cultures, in Indian cultures. So while I was there, I met some people that introduced me to, that worked with the tribes in South Dakota. And I started to become immersed in the law as it applies to Native Americans, which is very different. And one thing led to another. I just applied my knowledge and skills as a land use attorney to their specific interests.
Okay.
And if you're not involved in gaming, there's not a whole lot of money in doing that type of thing, so there wasn't a whole lot of competition, so I was able to kind of rise up through the ranks relatively quickly with regard to doing that, because there aren't a whole lot of people that were that committed to it.
And now that, so you were out in South Dakota doing that kind of work, you came back to Massachusetts. Are you still involved in that kind of work?
I am.
Okay.
But it's expanded. You know, in those days, you almost had to be on site all the time to get things done. But the world has changed so much because of technology and because I now have a network of people that I can work with, that you can do a lot of it not on site. And
Right. And let's talk a little bit about all the committees you're on here in Ashland. What got you first started? What was the first committee? And
well, I guess what got me involved in Ashland politics was Warren Woods. You know, and I wasn't on any committee during that time. I had known at that time. I was back staying with my mother, and our family had known the Warrens, and it's kind of like the last section of Ashland that still looks like Ashland used to look when my sisters and I grew up, and. So I got involved in that, and one thing led to another. I was solely involved in just the Warren Woods preservation without being on any committee.
Right.
And once that was settled, I was asked if I would be interested in being a part of the Conservation Commission, because the Conservation Commission was playing such an important role in the stewardship of Warren Woods. And so I said yes, and then the Stewardship Committee was created there. And the run for Board of Selectmen, I'm not sure where that came from, to tell you the truth. I'm not sure where that came, other than the fact that there were, and there still are, I think that Ashland is really at a turning point with regard to a lot of things. And I thought I had a unique perspective, the fact that I had grown up here, and my mother had grown up here, and my grandfather had grown up here, and so our family roots run deep here. And I feel like I have a lot of old friends here, a lot of new friends here, so I was able to bring what I thought was a unique perspective to a lot of the issues, not just to the land issues.
And how do you feel your year is going as a member of the board?
Well, I've always had an appreciation for the amount of time that these volunteer positions take up, but I have a new appreciation for the amount of time that you have to put in to be an effective member of the Board of Selectmen. And so it's been very tiring for me, because I work 2 jobs and I'm on several different committees, and I'm still trying to have a life. And so you know, it's something that you can maybe do easier when you're 35 than when you're my age. So it's been tiring, but most of the time it's been rewarding, and sometimes it's been frustrating, but that comes with the territory.
Right. So your term is up at the end of May. Have you considered yet if you'll run again?
You know, I haven't made up my mind.
Right.
I've considered it. It's just there have been so many things going on just in town. With the override discussions and the myriad of things that are ongoing in
projects and development.
That just trying to stay up to date on things has been a challenge for me, and to get up to date on things that I really wasn't
involved with before.
So it's, you know, I guess sooner or later I'll have to make up my mind, but I haven't really thought about it.
Right.
It's other people seem to bring it up to me more than I bring it up to myself.
And that you'll get that. You'll get that. People are like, oh, especially, it's one of those things that if people like what you're doing, they want you to stay. And if they don't like what you're doing, they'll say, never mind. Good. So before we wrap up, I have one question, and I ask this question of all new guests on the show. It's not that hard, so don't worry.
Okay.
The question is there something about you, Carl Hakansson, that not many people may know that you'd be willing to share with our viewers?
That not many people know. Boy, that's a tough one. I guess I can't say that not many people know this. A lot of people that know me from the political fields don't know that I'm a musician. Mm-hmm. And that's something that's really it's been a common thread for me for my entire life. I guess the other thing is that some people may not know is that my family roots go back so far, and that my grandfather, who I never met because he died relatively young, was a selectman in town for close to 20 years in the 20s and 30s. Yeah,
that's cool when you brought that information to one of our meetings and shared that with us.
The funny thing
was
about
very interesting.
That my grandfather is I never met him. He passed away 14 or 15 years before. He passed away before any of us were born.
Yeah.
But he was so alive in the stories of my mother. So as long as, and my mother's been gone now for a few years, but she lived to be 90 years old. And she was a great storyteller of Ashland. And just this morning I was talking with Mrs. Briasco, who owns the Organ Club.
Okay.
And she said, are you the same Hakansson family? And then we just went down that road, that my dad knew her husband, and then her husband went to school with my mother, and it was just, it makes it feel like such a village still when those type of things happen.
And for me, as someone, my parents were, immigrants. They came over from Belgium. I'm first generation American. My parents moved around a fair amount when I was younger, so it's interesting to me to hear those stories of people who their parents, their grandparents have stayed in one place. But what I think is interesting about Ashland is, for me and my husband, we've been in town for, it's over 25 years, but because there are people who have been here that long, we feel like we have become real citizens and community members of Ashland, because people who have been here for so long have been very welcoming and open to say, we might have been here this long, but we are open to people who haven't been here as long. And I think that's part of what makes Ashland very unique, is that mix of people who have that history and whose family has been here, as well as those of us who haven't been here as long but want to make Ashland our home, and so that our children can have some of the things that you have.
It's kind of fun to share that. My mother's roots are deep here, but my dad was an immigrant. He came from Sweden.
Okay.
But, it's fun. When I got involved in Warren Woods, I hadn't been involved in anything politically or work-wise in Ashland, kind of by design. And so obviously a lot of people had moved in that I didn't know.
Right.
And the political hierarchy were a lot of people that I didn't know. And conversely, I've met so many people that have moved to Ashland and have made Ashland their home and love Ashland, and that actually like hearing some of those stories. Because sometimes, for people that have lived here for a while, they just kind of roll your eyes when you start telling those stories. But it's what makes a little town, is to have those stories. We spoke earlier about the little controversy between Joe Magnani and myself that runs back 50 years, except it seems like it was yesterday.
Right. And we will have both of you on the show in the near future to share that story.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you for being on Around the Clock.
Well, thank you for having me.
Stay with us, and we'll be back with more Around the Clock. Welcome back to Around the Clock. Let's talk sports. Our Clocker Club has been very busy. Hopefully you've had a chance to stop by the store and buy your Clocker apparel as you attend different things. We've been able to show you basketball games, both the boys and girls teams. And the big news that we want to let people know is that we are now live streaming both of those teams and their games. So if you can't get to the game but want to be able to watch it in real time, you can come to the Around the Clock Facebook page and click on the live stream link. Once you get to that live stream link, you have two choices. You can pick and become a member so that you'll get notifications about the live streaming and when those events are happening. And that would be not just for the sports, but also for all the meetings that are going on. Or you can just follow Around the Clock on Facebook, and you can go to our page anytime and see what events are coming up and what will be streaming live. So here's some of our footage of the boys and girls basketball teams.
Westwood, and then wins over Norton. Over Sherbert and now Bellingham. They're still fighting. Jump ball. Time expires.
Oh, she hit her head.
Not a big sports update this show. It's a little bit quiet. We do have our boys and girls basketball teams. We also have ice hockey going on right now. I expect spring will get a little bit busier as there are a few more spring sports. But again, just keep coming back and checking with our Around the Clock Facebook page, and you'll be able to see any of the live streaming events that we do. So stay with us, and we'll be back with some of the upcoming events and things that are going on here in Ashland. Welcome back to Around the Clock. It's time for our Around the Town tour. As this is our first show in January, we're going to take you back a little bit to before the holidays to share with you some of the things that happened that we didn't get the opportunity to cover. We're going to start with the Tri-Board meeting that happened back at the end of December. Again, the Tri-Board meeting is a meeting of the Finance Committee, School Committee, and Board of Selectmen. And at our last meeting, we had discussions regarding the Override Study Committee report. We talked about what that report was, what they were recommending, and the recommendation from that report was a two-tiered override. And keep following with us at Around the Clock, because as we continue toward town meeting, there'll be more discussion and more opportunities for you to go to places to ask questions. So here's some of that footage from the Tri-Board meeting.
So I just want to provide some of the takeaways and concerns that were provided at the public forum, and then also give some of the ongoing concerns that have been raised by Override Study Committee members as well. So from the public forums, we heard about the fears of an override being a Band-Aid approach, need to demonstrate a plan. Affordability certainly was a major concern. The idea of living within our means was heard a variety of times. The need to be holistic in our approach. We heard that citizens wanted a choice. Whatever we recommended in terms of programs and services, citizens wanted to have a choice. And then we heard pretty loud and clear concerns about growth and development in town and the direction the town is taking in those areas.
Another event we want to take you that also happened in December was Clocker Idol at our high school. So this is a takeoff of the American Idol show that you see on TV, where different students come and present and get picked as the Clocker Idol of the Ashland High School.
Oh, don't you dare look back, just keep your eyes on me. I said you're holding back. She said shut up and dance with me. This woman is my destiny.
3:30 in the morning, not a soul in sight. City's looking like a ghost town on a moonless summer night.
But I wonder what would happen if you say what you wanna say and let the words fall out. Honestly, I wanna see you make my crown. Кто знает закон бытия.
Yeah, I'm good. let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand.
Hands that smile in the midnight lamp she's given me now. The winner of season 2 Clocker Idol is
We're going to move into January, and we're going to talk and show you the town manager interview that happened. So Mike Herbert, who we've spoken with on this show, was our assistant town manager. He became our interim town manager as of January 4th when we lost Tony Schiavi. And now Mike has been made our full-time town manager. And we just want to share with you a little bit of the interview process that happened at the community center. We want to thank all the public that came out as part of the interview process. And we're very glad and looking forward to working with Mike as our full-time town manager.
You know, once again, I can't express to you how appreciative I am for you know, the opportunity to be the interim town manager and potentially the opportunity to be the permanent town manager. And also, you know, thanks again to the community and for coming out, and my wonderful wife who has been very supportive, and wonderful staff members who really, you know, keep things running. Not just keep things running, they keep things running in a positive direction. You know, when Tony made his announcement, I was kind of shocked. You know, I knew this was probably in his future. I just didn't realize it was going to happen at that point in time. So I immediately went to you and said, I'm happy to serve as the interim town manager. I need to think a little bit about being a candidate for the permanent. And during that time period, I got to do a lot of soul searching, if you will, and a reconnaissance as well, because, you know, I wanted to see who could potentially, you know, fill Tony's shoes, because I've put a lot into this community, as you have, and, you know, I didn't want to see somebody come in that would just completely, you know, go in the opposite direction.
Our next stop on Around the Town tour is back at the community center, but this time it is for the Downtown Summit. So this was a second meeting that the Board of Selectmen sponsored regarding downtown and what are some things that we can do to start sprucing up downtown that will help us move forward into a downtown that will drive economic development and bring more people to our downtown. We had a lot of interaction. We had members from the Garden Club, members from the Ashland Redevelopment Authority, members of the Ashland Business Association, as well as Planning Board and Board of Selectmen. Some great discussion was had, and we also had our new Economic Director, Beth Reynolds, as well. Our last item that we want to talk about on our Around the Town tour is the Adopt a Hydrant program. We presented this information back in December, and we've started seeing some pictures up on the fire department's Facebook page of people who have shoveled out their hydrants. So if you have a hydrant near you, go ahead, shovel it out, put a picture up on the fire department's Facebook page, and maybe you'll be selected as someone to get a gift of a Papagino's gift certificate. And that announcement will be made at the first meeting in February by the Board of Selectmen. So help out our town, help out our fire department, and keep yourself safe by adopting a hydrant and getting out and doing some shoveling. Welcome back to Around the Clock. As we close out our first show, January 2016, I want to say thank you to Mike Herbert, who came and spoke with us, and also Carl Hakansson, who spent some time here with us and helped me with the Selectmen's update. As always, I appreciate having you, our viewers, join us. And if you ever have a story, please let us know. And also like us on Facebook so you can see all the events that are going on and that Around the Clock is sharing. Thanks again for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you in February.